So last class we had seen verse number 63. We will read that verse and we will read 64 also, because 63 and 64 go together. So if you remember, 63 was how anger is born, and then what happens when anger is born is discussed in 64. So these two verses go together. So we will read 63 and 64 together. Sorry, 62 and 63. So we had seen 62. Now we will see 62 and 63. We will read together. Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat krodho bijayate krodhat bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibhramaha smriti भ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशो बुद्धिनाशात् प्रणश्यति. So basically in 62 was the last verse. Krishna had discussed about how anger is born. Anger is so in different stages. So it all starts with an object. We look at an object. There's nothing wrong in looking at any object. It could be a inanimate object, it could be a person, it could be anything. We see an object, we look at it, there's nothing wrong. Then when we start focusing on that object again, slowly we develop a liking for that object. So this is how advertisement works. If you really look at it, they keep on repeating the same. Initially you look at an ad, you don't develop any kind of liking for it probably. As it keeps repeating, you again and again look at it. You look at it, okay, maybe it's a car. Initially you look at it, oh, nice car. You leave it at that. Again and again, when you see that car, you start, oh, that car looks nice. So you start thinking about that car. You start sort of meditating upon that car. Then you start taking a liking for that. Slowly you develop a liking. Once you develop a liking, over a period of time, you want to possess it. The more you want to possess it, the more your mind looks forward to getting that in your hand. A time comes when your whole mind is only occupied on how to possess that object, that car. Suppose we take an example of a car. The whole mind is only focused on how to get that car. Now you may work for it. Okay, it could be a Benz, so you have to shell out probably a few lakhs or probably a couple of crores also. If you have the resources, or if you have the ways and means to get the resources, you can work for it, and if you succeed, you can possess that. Absolutely no problem. But suppose that object is not within your resources, you are not able to raise the resources, it becomes slowly frustration in your mind, which becomes anger. So that anger, what it will lead to is discussed in the 65 third verse. So this is the process. So it could be a simple object, it could be a person also. We have seen people are attracted to a boy, may be attracted towards a girl. Slowly, first this thing he likes her, then slowly it becomes a sort of an obsession. So instead of meditating upon things which will improve the mind, he starts only concentrating or meditating upon that person, and slowly that becomes an obsession. And as long as it materializes in what that person wants, fine. But if you don't get what you want, the consequences, it leads to anger. So from looking at an object to getting a fancy to it, to slowly developing a kind of a obsession to possess that, and then you come to a stage where you feel without that object my life is useless. Without having that car, what is the point in living? Or without marrying that person, whether it is a boy or a girl, my life will be useless. So once you come to that stage, it becomes, suppose you are not able to get it. Suppose you have come to a stage where you have tried everything but you are unable to possess it. That moment it becomes anger. So from object it becomes, slowly it becomes anger. So this is how anger is. So we can take this as a guide for anger management, because this is how anger is born. Now we can cut off in the first stage itself. You look at an object, you like it, fine, there's nothing wrong. Move on. If that object or person is you are associated with some pleasant memories, good, you can just reflect upon those, move on. But when it comes to the next stage, slowly you develop a fancy for it. That is the warning sign. If you cut it off at that level, it will stop you from going to the next stage. So the first stage is absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong. But when you take a fancy to either a person or an object, it leads to the next stage. So at this stage, okay, if there is a possibility of obtaining that, there's nothing wrong. Go ahead. You want to buy a car, you have the resources, you want to buy it, great. So if you don't do that, then the next stage you become obsessed with it, and you come to a stage where you feel your whole life will be waste without that object or that person. That is the extreme stage, which the next step leads to anger. So basically anger management, if we want to, because anger is a reaction, it is not an action. We cannot decide not to be angry. It's a process. Anger just happens. But if we reflect upon it, the basic cause is an object. So once you understand where the anger starts from, the fulfillment of that need. So an object by itself, there is no problem. But if you want to possess that and you come to a stage where you think you cannot live without that object, that becomes a very dangerous situation. And that is what leads to anger. So we should learn to look at things in a very objective way. Look at an object, fine. If you want to go further, there's no harm up to the next stage. But if you come to a stage where you feel, where you are always meditating upon that rather than meditating upon other positive things, you are always meditating upon that particular object, that is the warning sign. If you feel that, you should have that maturity to stop at that stage. Okay, then it moves on to a very dangerous state, from which difficult. If you feel that without that I cannot survive, and then you don't get it, that is the time where it moves completely to the next stage, anger. And what it leads to, we will see in the next verse. So this is the process. How from one to other things are born, from an object to a fancy, to an obsession, to a stage where you feel you cannot live without it, and from that anger is born. Even sometimes you happen to obtain that object, it doesn't mean that is the end of it. Because once you get what you want, there's always a chance that you want to get something more. And the process continues. So we have to be alert, the mind, and that is why all this teaching is about. So instead of thinking about external objects, think about yourself. So that is what the whole teaching is. Find more time. You can look at objects, you can have, there's nothing wrong, you can enjoy, but don't go on to the next stage. That is what Krishna is warning. So this is this is the way to manage anger. So once you know the process, you know the root cause, it will be easier to manage. So anger is something which we have to learn to manage. Because once it goes out of control, we are going to see what is the consequence. So next verse, we are going to see what is the consequence of anger. So what happens when anger takes over? One start losing control over oneself. So anger leads to delusion. So up to anger, it was from object, a fancy is born. From fancy, an obsession is born. And ultimately anger is born. So all this leads to one or other. Now the next is the consequence, what it leads to. So anger leads to delusion. Delusion is a stage where you think you are something more than what you actually are. So you start losing control of yourself. And what happens when your mind is deluded? It leads to loss of memory. We forget all the teaching that we have gone through. Your anger leads to delusion, and delusion leads to loss of memory. So slowly you are moving towards self-destruction. So this is what is going to happen. And when you have loss of memory, it leads to temporary madness. So when you are angry, you will not even know who is in front of you. It could be your teacher, it could be your parent. You lose control. And once you lose control of yourself, you act instinctively, which is no different from an animal. Animals are driven by instinct. Similarly, a person who becomes angry at a particular point, he just goes by instinct, and whatever happens after that, the consequences, we never know what is going to happen. In fact, a few years back there was a case where one boy killed a girl in broad daylight in the railway station. So obviously he developed a liking for her, and he used to follow her every day, and she refused to have any contact with him. So from this we can see each stage, and slowly it developed an anger in him, and it led to destruction of both. He killed her, and finally he also got arrested, and finally he also died. So you can see the consequence of anger. It's a very real incident which happened a few years, and there must be many more incidents like this. So when you come to a stage where you lose your mind, so to say, the consequence is only destruction. And in this case, 2 people were destroyed because of one person's anger. 2 people were destroyed. So this is the stage through which one goes through once it all starts with an object. So this is what we need to understand. At that initial stage itself, we should have the discrimination to cut it off. Otherwise, it is like anger is like a virus. So virus destroys the hard disk of a computer. Similarly, our hard disk is the brain. So anger is the virus which destroys the brain, and once your brain is destroyed, whatever decisions you're going to take are going to be faulty. Even in sports, people say brain fade moment. People do some things which ultimately they describe as brain fade. So all this is because you want something so badly, and if you don't get it, in a sports probably they are so obsessed with victory that if they don't get it, they do something which they should not do, and then later they explain it as a brain fade moment. I lost my brain. So what is the root cause? It doesn't happen just like that. The person loses control over his senses, and once you lose control, the consequences can be anything. People even against their own siblings or parents or teachers also, they do actions which are not supposed to be done, and then later on they regret, and their whole life will be about that regret. But all this could have been prevented if they had been alert in the first place. That alertness should come. So this is what through this teaching we need to understand. So the whole purpose of this teaching is to understand what goes through this, because these are all things which happen day to day. We must have come across such cases where people in a fit of anger, they do things, you become more like an animal. You don't behave like, once you lose control, you behave like an animal. After that, whatever happens, you don't know whether it can be reversed. Like you kill somebody, it cannot be reversed. Or even if you hurt somebody, it becomes a lifelong thing. Of course, anger has to be, you cannot say you cannot get angry, you should not get angry. It's very easy to say. But practically, it is not possible that one cannot get angry at all. Of course, there are a few people maybe who are less likely to get angry than others. Some people, just a spark is enough for them to get angry. Some people have a longer patience and this thing to come to that point, flash point as they say. But at any time it is for us to reflect upon. So that is why all this teaching. So whenever we have time, instead of focusing on objects, that's what Krishna wants to say ultimately. Spend time on understanding yourself. So all this teaching. So the meditation should be on the self rather than any object. So ultimately in Vedanta, meditation means mainly only meditating upon the self. All other forms of meditation, you use some medium to meditate upon. It is good for a short while, but ultimately it is not going to lead us anywhere. So all the other forms of meditation, they are all good. I am not criticizing or I am not saying they are bad, but you meditate, you achieve a calm mind probably for some time, but doesn't last. I have seen people who go for this Vipassana meditation, that 10-day course. They have to sit without even looking at the person in front. So it is good. It's a sort of a diet for the mind. If you do it once, it is good. It's a diet for the mind. They say after the first 2 days are terrible, third day, but after that, if you are able to go through, you can manage the next few days. So what I am coming to say is all that is good, nothing wrong, but we should not again get obsessed with those things, because ultimately if you are clear about the goal is to attain moksha. So that, like Shruti in music, that goal should be playing in the back of the mind, moksha, 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 and if that is the goal, then all our action should be oriented towards that. If that is clear, then the chances, so you will be able to be aware where you are losing track. So you meditate upon the teaching. The more you meditate upon the teaching, your awareness becomes more, and you will be able to find when you are not in the track, you are moving away from the track. So your mind will be alert enough to warn you. Okay, now it's time to. You have gone to a stage, good, but come back to the normal. So don't get carried away by any of these things. So this is what these two verses are conveying. What happens, how an object finally gives birth to anger, and what is the consequences of anger. So anger management is only through reflection. We can and ensure that even if one is angry, it doesn't destroy the person opposite. It should not destroy you also, because if anger is held within, it will destroy that person. If anger comes out, it may destroy the other person. So like Lord Shiva holding the poison in his throat, they say you hold it, express it in a way that it doesn't destroy the other person, and don't hold it where it comes to a point where you burst out like a volcano. And then what is the consequence of that? You have no idea, and you have absolutely no control. So this is, all these are practical things which are told by Krishna. It is not that something which is not possible. He is not telling you something like you jump and pluck the star from the sky or something like that. Just saying, be aware of yourself, spend time. This knowledge, the more you are able to focus on this knowledge, the more you will be able to progress in your path. So this is the message he is trying to give. Now let us move on to verse number 64. Ragadvesha vimuktaistu vishayanindrayeshcharan atma vashay vidhir yatma prasadamadi gacchati. So now coming back to again the sense organs. So Krishna is saying again, one whose mind is controlled, moving, you cannot close your eyes and say, okay, I will not look at it, so I will not get angry by closing my eyes. You cannot say, I will plug my ears, I will not listen to anything, and say, because of that I will not get angry. It doesn't work that way. We have to live in this world. We have to face these situations and still develop that maturity to not fall into the trap. So this is a continuous process which we have to go through. So sense organs are controllable by practice. So we need to constantly, you look at objects but don't get carried away. You can enjoy. That is what the entire world is there to enjoy. But one should not get carried away. They should not be addictive. So that is what, enjoy, but don't get addicted to anything. The more you get addicted to anything, the more there will be suffering. The more addiction, more attachment, and again the whole process of being going into that stage of anger, and then whatever consequence that leads to, we all know. So over a period of time, by constant working on them, we should make the sense organs listen to us rather than we listening to them. We falling trapped to them. We should have them under control. It's easy to say, but that is what the whole purpose of studying Bhagavad Gita is. Because if we don't meditate upon this, naturally we will be moving along in a different path. So once again the goal is clear, the process should be very clear to us. So first is to gain control over the sense organs, enjoy all the good things that come through the sense organs, enjoy the world through your eyes, enjoy music or any other thing through the ears, have good food, enjoy the taste. All these are meant to enjoy, but don't get attached to anything. You cannot say, okay, without coffee I cannot live. So most of us have this habit of having coffee or tea in the morning, and even if we don't get it for a day, it makes us mad, so to say. So people waste their entire day because they feel without that coffee or that tea in the morning, my day is gone. So a simple thing which most of us have habit. It's not that a few. Of course, there are other addictions which are avoidable, more avoidable. Drinking, smoking, addictions to those, they definitely are much more dangerous But even those addictions apart, even simple addictions like being addicted to coffee, people are addicted to even while attending a Vedanta class, people are obsessed with sitting in a particular place. And if somebody else sits there, they get mad. So the whole purpose of attending the class itself goes waste. I have seen it personally. in Rishikesh when I went for Swami Dayananda's camp. They all booked their places, they put their names on the seats. They are so obsessed. So there itself the whole purpose is lost. You're trying to understand something, trying to understand yourself, and you're not even able to get over a simple thing like the whole place is there. There is enough seat for everybody. You sit wherever you get a seat. And once you find that somebody else is sitting on your seat, the whole class is gone. You're only meditating upon why you didn't get that seat, why that person sat on my seat, how can he sit on that seat. So this is simple things which is very common to most of us. It's not that it is something which is only few people. So even there, slowly we have to understand and change our track. 2 days, 3 days you don't have coffee, then you may feel there's a little headache or there's a little discomfort. After that you will get used to it. So there's nothing. So we should probably break that habit once in a while. Enjoy the coffee, there's nothing wrong. But don't get so addicted that without coffee my whole day is gone. So these are all practical things which we need to, and that is what Bhagavad Gita is absolutely. There are a lot of people who say no, it is not for everybody, it is not practicable. I don't think there's any difficulty if we want to do it. If we don't want to do something, then it's our choice. But if we really put our mind and we want to move towards that goal, all these things it takes little discipline, it takes a little bit of effort, no doubt. But it is not impossible. So this is what they say. The other way of getting moksha is if somebody can roll up the sky and make it into a nice roll, you will get moksha. So that is the most easy thing. You don't have to study anything. Just pull the sky, roll it completely. And if you are able to roll the entire sky, you will get moksha. So this is the very simple method. No need of attending Bhagavad Gita class or anything of that sort. Simple thing like rolling a mat, you roll the sky. So that is the simple method. So people can choose either that or this. So we will conclude with this today. We will continue in the next class.